So while the United States says it will not abandon the peace process, the efforts by the Obama administration during the last 9 months have so far proven futile. Bringing the Israelis and Palestinians back to the table will not be easy. For the latest, we're joined now by CCTV's Stephanie Freid from Tel Aviv. And Stephanie, well, the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, was very emphatic there. No talks as long as Hamas is involved, and this has pushed the two sides even further apart. So where does that leave the peace process?
Well, Anand, now the Israeli government last week announced, or on the heels basically of this other announcement by Fatah Hamas that they were going to reconcile, immediate response was to freeze those negotiations. However, the Israeli government still has left a sliver of an opening, saying they're still open to negotiations. Of course, the stipulation being that the Fatah organization, the Fatah faction of the Palestinian organization or of the PLO, not join forces with Hamas. Also, Israel's wanting, if that were to happen, but they're not saying so, Hamas would have to recognize Israel. Hamas doesn't. It calls for Israel's destruction. So those things to fall in place. But for right now, Israel has frozen the negotiations. They've also frozen what amounts to about 2/3 of Palestinian revenue that comes through on a monthly basis. And today they announced that they're going to freeze building in a Palestinian area of the West Bank that Israel controls. So these are sanctions that are hitting in, you would say, tit-for-tat sort of retaliation for this announcement. Anand?
Right, it looks like President Abbas has been reaching out to the Israelis since that announcement of an agreement with Hamas. He did say that the Holocaust was the most heinous crime in recent history. How has Israel responded to that statement?
Well, Benjamin Netanyahu immediately responded rather harshly. He threw it out. He tossed it out, saying that this was Abu Mazen, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas. This was his way of basically trying to curry favor with the West. He was trying to wiggle his way, were the words that the Netanyahu government used, wiggle his way away from the agreement that he had just made with Hamas. It was not accepted. This statement was not accepted. And actually thrown out because, as the Netanyahu government said, the consensus was that Fatah is making an agreement with a body that calls for Israel's destruction and annihilation. So it was refuted, essentially.
Right, and to add fuel to the fire, there is a report that the U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry said that Israel risks becoming an apartheid state if it doesn't agree on a two-state solution. Now that, as we know, is a very emotive term. It's a very controversial term. It hasn't been used by this administration. They've avoided using that term. So what's been the response in Israel to that?
Well, the response in Israel, certainly to that sort of statement, word of that statement coming out, is not favorable. The government is refraining at the moment from making any official statement because these comments by Secretary of State Kerry have leaked out, so to speak, from meetings that he was in with other leaders of Europe and the United States. However, the similar, or basically the sort of statement aligning Israel with apartheid policy will not go down well in this country, certainly not with the leaders or with the people here waiting for an official statement to come out. But among the people, they're unhappy, but then they've looked with sort of a doubtful eye upon Secretary of State Kerry and his efforts here throughout this 9-month process. So again, this is just more doubt and more suspicion regarding his intentions or how he's going forward in terms of this process.
And Stephanie, what's the mood like in the West Bank? You've been traveling there. What are you hearing there?
Well, I actually spoke with a senior member of the Fatah committee. That would be the Palestinian Authority Committee, the central committee there. Yesterday, I sat with him. The mood is that they're busy. They are trying to work something out with Hamas. And there's a lot of pressure there to do so, not only with the people, but also on the two sides in terms of the higher-ups. The mood is the people want there to be a rejoining of forces between the two forces that have been separated. I will note, though, however, when speaking with this senior figure within the Palestinian Authority, he reassured that any unity between these two sides will stipulate that Hamas will recognize Israel. That remains to be seen. remains to be seen whether this will succeed. But this is the mood, if you will, in a large sense, coming out of the West Bank and Gaza.
Stephanie Freid, thanks for that.